There's this incredible feeling of empowerment that comes from being truly prepared for the unexpected. It's almost like having a superpower, right? Being able to look at, well, nature's fury and know you've done everything you possibly can to keep yourself and your loved ones safe. So today, we're doing a deep dive into disaster preparedness and personal safety. We've pulled from a stack of really incredible sources, everything from specialized building guides to some raw, real-life survival stories.
Absolutely. And our mission for you today is pretty clear. We're here to extract the most important nuggets of knowledge and, maybe more importantly, the truly practical tips. We want to help you keep yourself and your home safe, whether you're facing, say, a tornado, a lightning storm, heavy rain, or even just a long power outage. We'll explore the how you prepare, the why these things matter, and give you concrete examples you can actually learn from, because, that's where the real insight often comes from for your own safety.
That's exactly right. And when we talk about keeping safe, it really does begin at home, doesn't it? Long before a storm even hits. I was just thinking about a movie like Twisters. Okay, it might dramatize things, but it raises some very real questions about how robust our homes actually are during intense weather, which brings us to solutions like insulated concrete forms or ICFs. What exactly are these and how do they make a difference?
Yeah, it's interesting. ICFs are more than just a construction buzzword. They're a building solution made of high-density foam insulation wrapped around a steel-reinforced concrete core. And their benefits for home protection are quite compelling. For instance, they're incredibly durable. Nudura ICFs, specifically, they can withstand winds up to 250 miles per hour. That's the equivalent of an F4 tornado. Plus, they offer protection against flying debris traveling at speeds up to 100 miles per hour.
250 miles per hour? Wow. That's incredible. But let's be real for a second. A lot of our listeners are probably in existing homes, right? Not building new ones from scratch. So what's one actionable takeaway from this idea of building smarter that someone in an older house could still apply, even if they can't, pour ICFs tomorrow?
That's a really great point. And yet, while you might not be building with ICS tomorrow, the underlying principles of modern building codes offer some powerful lessons. If we connect this to the bigger picture, these codes are actually becoming a cornerstone of community resilience. Take what happened during Hurricane Milton in Florida, for example. Homes built to higher code standards. Maybe they were elevated just a few feet above ground level, or they had critical utilities like HVAC units placed higher up, maybe shoulder height instead of knee level well. Those homes actually became safe havens. These relatively small but mighty changes they accumulated. They allowed those homes to maintain power and even air conditioning for days, even when the surrounding areas were completely dark. So for an existing homeowner, this means thinking about where your most vulnerable systems are. What small targeted upgrades or protective measures can you implement? Things like ensuring proper drainage away from your foundation or sealing air gaps. Little things add up.
So it's about thinking like a builder, in a way, even if you're not actually building.
Okay.
Now, we've talked about fortifying the home, the structure itself. But what happens when the storm is actively threatening? What are the immediate actions we need to take when nature is truly, unleashing its fury? Let's maybe start with one of the most unpredictable threats, lightning.
Right. This brings up that really important question, knowing what to do in the moment. For lightning safety, the primary rule is simple, but people often overlook it. When thunder roars, go indoors. Seriously, if you can hear thunder, lightning is close enough to be a threat. It doesn't matter if the skies still look blue or it hasn't started raining yet. Your safest bet is always a substantial building, one with plumbing and electricity.
Okay, I've heard that advice like a million times, but I've never fully grasped the science behind why a car is safe, but say a picnic shelter isn't. Can you unpack that a bit more for us?
Absolutely, it's a common question. A hard-top metal vehicle with the windows closed is safe because it acts like a Faraday cage. Basically, it diverts the electrical current around the outside of the vehicle and safely into the ground, protecting those inside. Unsafe shelters, on the other hand, include things like sheds, picnic shelters, tents, or even covered porches. They offer basically no real protection against a direct strike or even ground current. And once you're inside a safe place, stay there. Stay there for at least 30 minutes after the last rumble of thunder. That's the key. Inside safety tips. Avoid corded phones unless it's a genuine emergency. Stay away from electrical equipment and plumbing. Lightning can travel through those systems, so no bathing or washing dishes during a storm. And if you do get caught outside, avoid open areas, obviously, so you're not the tallest object around. Stay clear of isolated tall trees, towers, utility poles, and anything metal like wires or fences. If you're with a group, spread out. I know that sounds counterintuitive, but it increases the chance that if someone is struck, others are unharmed and can help. It prevents multiple casualties from a single strike. And if someone is struck, remember this crucial point. They do not carry an electrical charge. You can touch them. Call 911 immediately, begin CPR if you're trained, and use an AED if one's available. It's also vital to remember that lightning can strike twice. It happens. Annually in the U.S., there are about 25 million cloud-to-ground flashes, and around 300 people are struck. That results in roughly 30 fatalities, and for many others, lifelong disabilities. Most of these tragedies, honestly, are preventable with simple, timely actions.
Wow. Those are powerful tips, especially that 30-minute rule in the car explanation. That makes a lot more sense now. Okay, shifting gears slightly for another really common weather threat, heavy rainfall and potential flooding. What proactive steps can we take there, and what should we absolutely not do during a heavy downpour?
Yeah, flooding is a big one. For heavy rainfall and flooding preparedness, the proactive steps are absolutely key. Before a storm even hits, clear any storm drains near your house. Make sure your eave troughs or gutters are clear, and crucially, pointed down and away from your home's foundation. And always, always have a family emergency plan discussed and ready. And a well-stocked emergency supply kit will definitely dive deeper into that kit in a bit. During the actual heavy rain, wear protective clothing if you must be out briefly, but really, seek indoor shelter. Stay away from windows and doors. And critically, avoid roadway underpasses, drainage ditches, and any low-lying areas where water tends to collect. These can flood incredibly quickly and unexpectedly. And here's a critical driving safety tip. Never, ever try to drive across a flooded road. So many people underestimate this danger. It only takes a few inches of moving water to displace a vehicle. Seriously, just a few inches. What looks like a small puddle could easily be a raging current hiding debris, or maybe the road underneath is washed out, or there could even be live electrical wires down. The water could be much deeper or stronger than it looks. It's just never worth the risk. Also, always stay away from down power lines, obviously, and keep monitoring alerts and weather reports for any flash flood warnings.
Turn around and don't drown. That phrase really sticks, doesn't it? Those immediate safety steps are vital. But, as we often see, the storm itself isn't always the end of the challenge. Power outages are a huge issue that often follow severe weather. How do we survive that aftermath, and what exactly causes them so often?
Right. This is where understanding the grid's vulnerabilities and having proper preparation for outages becomes absolutely critical. Power outages during storms are mainly caused by things like falling trees or branches hitting lines. High winds over 39 miles per hour can actually topple utility poles, flooding that damages equipment. Lightning strikes overloading systems, and sometimes even preventive shutoffs by the utility companies themselves. And what's fascinating, Aaron, maybe a bit surprising, is that ice storms are often more destructive to power grids than hurricanes are.
Hey, hang on. Ice storms are more destructive than hurricanes? Really? That completely flips my perception. What specific mechanisms make ice so uniquely devastating to power lines compared to those, massive hurricane winds?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it surprises a lot of people. While hurricane winds can certainly cause widespread damage, snapping poles and things, ice accumulation is different. Ice coats everything. Even just a quarter inch of ice accumulation dramatically increases the weight on power lines, on tree branches hanging over lines, and on the utility poles themselves. This makes them incredibly brittle and prone to snapping. And it's not just one break, it causes these cascading failures across the grid. The electrical grid itself has several critical vulnerability points. You've got the overhead power lines, transformers, switching equipment, substations, even underground cables in some cases. All are susceptible to damage, but ice just hits them all relentlessly, adding weight and stress everywhere. So to prepare for that potential outage, your checklist needs to be pretty robust. First, assemble that emergency kit we mentioned: flashlights, extra batteries, and a battery-powered or hand-crank radio, preferably one that can receive NOAA weather radio tone alerts. That's the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration's continuous broadcast. Charge all your electronic devices and power banks before the storm hits. Fill bathtubs and other containers with water, because electric pumps might fail, meaning no running water, especially if you're on a well, but even from municipal systems sometimes. Stock non-perishable food, and don't forget a manual can opener. Test any backup power options you might have, like portable or standby generators, or maybe UPS systems, those uninterruptible power supplies which give you short-term battery power for critical electronics. And always know the locations of your main electrical panel and your gas shutoffs. Just knowing where they are is step one. Now, what's absolutely critical for generator safety is this. Never operate gas generators indoors or in enclosed spaces like garages or basements. The risk of carbon monoxide poisoning is incredibly real and deadly. Portable generators also should never be connected directly to your home's electrical system unless you have a proper transfer switch installed by an electrician. This prevents dangerous backfeed of power onto the grid, which could electrocute utility workers trying to restore power. For food safety during outages, remember this. A full freezer maintains safe temperatures about twice as long as a half-full one. So fill empty spaces with containers of water. Before a storm hits, they'll freeze and act like ice blocks. And discard perishable foods like meat, dairy, and leftovers after 4 hours without power. If the power goes out, first check if it's just you or widespread. Report it to your utility. Turn off major appliances to prevent surge damage when the power does come back on. Use flashlights, not candles, to reduce fire risk. Keep fridge and freezer doors closed as much as possible. And importantly, if you smell gas, leave the area immediately and call your gas company from a safe location, like a neighbor's house or down the street. Don't use your phone near the potential leak.
Okay, so basically, my phone becomes a very expensive paperweight unless I've actually charged everything beforehand. Noted. No more late-night TikTok scrolls right before a big storm, I guess. Beyond power, though, communication is another huge challenge in a disaster setting, right? Mobile networks can get overloaded almost instantly. What are our best bets for staying connected when the grid is down or overwhelmed?
Yeah, this is a crucial area. While cell phones are obviously useful, text messages and emails often get through even when voice calls can't, just because they use less bandwidth. So prioritize texting or emailing short, essential messages. And interestingly, traditional landline telephones, although they're less common now, can actually be lifesavers if the power and internet are down. Some old-style corded phones can operate without external power, drawing what they need from the phone line itself. Now, if all that technology fails, you really need independent methods. Satellite phones offer global coverage because they rely on orbiting satellites, not ground towers, but yeah, they're expensive. For shorter distances, two-way radios, walkie-talkies, allow direct communication for a small group on the same frequency. Pretty simple. Citizens Band, or CB radios, offer short-distance communication on specific public frequencies. They can be a source of general information, often used by truckers or travelers, but sometimes useful in emergencies. Amateur, or ASHAM radios, require a license to operate, but they offer a much longer range and generally more authenticated information, as AM operators often volunteer during emergencies to relay critical messages. And police scanners let you listen in on emergency communications, police, rescue, fire, military, which can give you situational awareness. But honestly, when all else fails, it often comes down to good old-fashioned word of mouth. Rely on those pre-established family emergency plans and meeting points, and staying in groups for safety and information sharing.
Wow. This all sounds incredibly intense, but it's such vital information. Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, though, I think. Let's look at some real-world examples from survivors, because sometimes the most important lessons, those true nuggets of insight, they come from people who have actually faced the storm, faced the disaster, and made it through.
Absolutely. Experience is a powerful teacher. One survival story that really illustrates several common mistakes, but also crucial lessons, comes from a hiker who got lost in a snowstorm. This individual, they went for a hike alone about an hour before sundown, which, right there is already a risky move in potentially bad weather. Their gloves froze, they couldn't follow their own tracks back, and then their waterproof clothing failed, leaving them completely drenched. They tried to build a shelter, but their knife was dull, basically useless for cutting branches. So they ended up spending the night freezing in a fetal position.
Oh man, that sounds absolutely harrowing. What common mistakes does this particular story highlight that, we can all learn from for our own preparedness, even if we're not lost in a snowstorm?
Yeah, it highlights several errors that actually apply across many disaster scenarios. First, underestimating the severity of the situation or delaying seeking or building shelter. This is something we see with some tornado survivors too, waiting just a bit too long. Second, a really severe lack of preparedness. No sharp knife or axe for shelter building. Forgetting to pack complete dry, warm clothing as a backup. And inadequate fire-starting materials. Even with a BIC lighter, wet wood was a huge issue. This is where something simple, like Vaseline-soaked cotton balls stored in a waterproof container, could literally be a game-changer for starting a fire in damp conditions. Third, poor communication. The hiker fired one shot from a firearm for distress, but the universal signal is usually 3. Anything done in 3 is known as a help signal, as the source material put it. Their friend actually heard the single shot, but didn't respond because it was ambiguous, and they were also afraid of revealing their own location. And finally, underestimating warm snow. It sounds weird, but warm, wet snow melts and clings to clothes, rendering even waterproof gear useless over time and dramatically accelerating heat loss, whereas very cold, dry snow just brushes off. This small detail about snow conditions can be the difference between getting chilled and developing severe hypothermia.
It's really striking how often the seemingly small details, like having a truly sharp knife, or knowing simple distress signals, or even understanding types of snow, can make all the difference between survival and frag. Well, what other key lessons emerge from this story and maybe other survival accounts you looked at?
Well, the key lessons learned from this and echoed in other experiences are pretty profound. First, timing. Don't start a hike, especially alone, when the sun is going down soon, particularly if weather is a factor. Use universal distress signals like 3 shots in succession, 3 whistle blasts, 3 flashes of light, something clear. Always carry essential gear, a robust knife, or maybe even a small tactical tomahawk for shelter building. Always bring a complete change of warm, dry clothes and a waterproof bag. And carry a reliable backup fire-starting materials. For navigation, especially in the backcountry, a map and compass or a reliable GPS unit is critical. Maybe even marking your paths with flagging tape or small cuts on bark if you're really going off trail. Mental fortitude is also huge. The survivor mentioned staying positive and distracting oneself, like listening to music on their phone until the battery died, helped combat very dark thoughts. Always try to use a buddy system if possible, and never go off alone without a clear plan and communication strategy. And what's fascinating is that the survivor later reflected, hiking experience is the most important part of survival. Fancy gear and watching a lot of YouTube videos is useless if you don't get out there to hike and gain experience. And I think that applies to any preparedness, right? You have to practice these things. And this really resonates with what we hear from other disaster survivors too, like those who've been through tornadoes. They often describe the sound very viscerally, like a freight train or even thrashing machine metal being chewed up. But then some also recount this eerie silence right before impact, maybe followed by a groan or moaning sound from the house or the wind. And many felt significant pressure changes in their ears. But what's consistently stressed across almost all these accounts is the effectiveness of seeking shelter quickly in the designated safe space. Interior hallways, bathrooms, basements, storm shelters. Many survivors also, understandably, experienced long-lasting psychological effects, shaking, nightmares, intense fear during future storms. But amidst all that chaos, the importance of community support, neighbors checking on each other, helping each other dig out, that often emerges as a really vital part of the immediate aftermath and longer-term recovery.
Okay, so we've heard the expert advice, the real-world stories. What does this all mean for you listening right now? How do we take all this incredibly important, sometimes, harrowing information and make it actionable for your own life right here, right now? I think it really starts with your personal toolkit, specifically your emergency supply kit. Let's get practical.
Exactly. This is your foundation, your starting point.
Yeah.
And remember, it should absolutely be tailored to your individual and family needs. Don't forget pets, if you have them. Now, for those of you who might already have your emergency kits pretty dialed in, bear with us for just a quick refresher on the absolute essentials. But we're also going to highlight a few often overlooked items, or maybe the crucial whys behind them that even seasoned preppers might miss sometimes.
Perfect. So beyond the obvious, like water and, canned beans, what's the one thing people almost always forget or maybe misunderstand about their emergency kit until it's actually too late?
That's a great question. It often comes down less to a specific item and more to the why behind it, or the quantity. For example, water. It's not just about having some water, it's about having at least 1 gallon per person per day for several days. And understanding why that stored water is critical, because those electric pumps for well water or even municipal water might fail during an outage. That's why filling bathtubs before the storm isn't just some quaint old tip. It's crucial for sanitation, for flushing toilets, for non-drinking uses when your regular water supply could be completely cut off for days. Okay, so for the core items checklist, you'll definitely need an extra cell phone battery or a reliable power bank. A battery-powered or hand-crank radio, again, preferably one that can receive those NOAA weather radio tone alerts, and extra batteries for both the radio and your flashlights. A good first aid kit is absolutely non-negotiable. A whistle to signal for help, simple, loud, effective. For air quality, a dust mask for each person is important, especially after earthquakes or building collapses. Plus, plastic sheeting and duct tape can help you seal a room if you need to shelter in place from airborne contaminants. For sanitation, moist towelettes, garbage bags, and plastic ties are essential. A non-sparking wrench or pliers to turn off utilities like gas or water if necessary and safe to do so. A manual can opener if your emergency food includes canned goods. And local maps, paper maps, because your phone GPS might not work. Beyond those basics, really consider adding prescription medications a week's supply if possible, and backup glasses or contacts. Infant formula and diapers if you have a baby. Pet food, water, and any necessary supplies for your furry family members. Important family documents, copies of insurance policies, IDs, bank records, keep them in a portable, waterproof container. And cash. Why cash? Because in a widespread outage, credit card systems go down fast, ATMs won't work. Cash becomes king very quickly, so have some small bills and change. Emergency reference material, like a basic first aid book or survival guide, can be helpful. For warmth, a sleeping bag or warm blanket for each person is crucial, maybe more in colder climates. A complete change of clothing, including a long-sleeve shirt, long pants, and sturdy shoes, is also a must again. More layers if you're in a cold climate. Other items to think about: a fire extinguisher, matches stored in a waterproof container, feminine supplies, personal hygiene items, hand sanitizer, mess kits, paper cups, plates, disposable utensils, paper towels, make life easier. And don't forget things to pass the time, especially if you have kids, paper, pencils, books, games, puzzles. These can be lifesavers for morale and mental well-being during a stressful, boring week. And here's a really practical tip. Have at least 2 kits. Keep one more comprehensive kit at home, and then smaller portable go bags in your workplace, your vehicle, or maybe any other places you frequently visit. This ensures you're prepared wherever you might be when disaster strikes unexpectedly.
Okay, wow. We've covered a lot today. From, fortifying your home with things like ICFs and just understanding modern building codes, to those immediate actions during lightning storms and floods, surviving power outages, dealing with communication breakdowns, and importantly, learning those critical lessons from people who have faced truly terrifying situations. It really all comes back to proactive measures, doesn't it? Understanding the specific hazards you might face and the incredible power of preparedness for your own personal safety and peace of mind.
Exactly. And remember, this knowledge isn't meant to foster fear. Not at all. It's about empowerment. It's about building resilience. Every single small step you take, whether it's finally clearing out those storm drains, actually assembling a basic emergency kit, or just sitting down and talking through a family communication plan, every step makes a tangible difference in your ability to withstand and recover from whatever nature or life might throw your way.
So as you go about your week, here's maybe a little something for you to chew on. What's one small, actionable step you will take this week? Just one thing to enhance your personal safety or your home preparedness for the unexpected. Maybe it is clearing those storm drains finally, or checking the batteries in your flashlight, or maybe just starting that conversation about an emergency plan with your family. That smallest step today could genuinely make the biggest difference tomorrow.